This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, and I'm the mayor for the District of North Vancouver. So the pleasure falls to me to welcome everybody here to the regular meeting of council of Monday, April 3rd at 7 o'clock. At this point, I'm going to call on Councillor Murray to read our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mayor Little. We respectfully acknowledge the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Okay, Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Hearing none, it's moved by Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ma, it's called a question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Council, we have one set of minutes that was circulated with the package from the March 13th regular meeting of council. Are there any errors or omissions from the minutes as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption? Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Murray. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay. At the front end of, we're going to do public input first. And so at the front end of every regular meeting of council, we reserve a time of up to 30 minutes to hear issues of concern from members of the public. Each person will be permitted to speak for up to 3 minutes. We do have a speakers list that was created by people calling in and communicating with the clerk's office ahead of time. And on that list, I do have 3 speakers who have identified an interest in speaking. And then we definitely will still have time available at that point. I'll come out, check, and see if anybody else would like to add their comments. Just before we get into that, I did want to remind everybody that this meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion, which means members of the public, council, staff can participate in this meeting through virtual means through our Zoom link that we have. And so you may see some staff comments from time to time pop up on the screens, but obviously all members of the council are here in person. And so at this point, I'm going to call up Lyle Craver, followed by John Lesso and Corey Cost. Lyle Craver, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Long time here in person. Good to be back.
Good to see you.
My comments tonight are mostly about the municipal budget, which is up for adoption tonight, and it's more along the lines of observations going forward. The council is, the budget is what it is, but I must confess, I feel deeply, deeply let down with the backtracking on the budget. This was originally a tight budget. It was clear that council had more than done its best to come up with a number that we could agree with. But even so, 4.5% is clearly more than inflation, and it's certainly more than anybody I know had as an increase in pay this year. The fact that organized pressure drove council to a plan B, and the 5.25% is regrettable, but is what it is. What I am much more disturbed by than simply 0.75% is the fact that in this budget, council is increasing their long-term borrowing figure from $30 to $90 million. That's a lot more than 1%. That number is huge. And I really do think that council will need to keep an iron grip that we don't go overboard with our long-term spending in the coming year and in the current term of council. By dipping into that extra $60 million, you can certainly, heck, you can even pay for a second police force. In any case, I do think patience is needed on this one. One other item on the agenda tonight I want to pay close attention to is to remind you of a very, very familiar quotation. I hope you bear in mind when you hear our speakers tonight. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by their character. Your worship, the presentation tonight flies directly in the face of that and is a complete abrogation. You are not judged by the power in that world. You are not judged by the power of your character, but by the individual group that you may or may not happen to belong to. I have zero faith in government picking and choosing winners in this way, and I do think that we need to be very, very careful to make sure that things don't get out of hand going forward. My time is up, so Mr. Chair, I thank you all, and once again, it's good to be back.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker that I have is John Lesso, followed by Corey Kosk. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Good evening, Mayor Little, members of council. Earlier, I sent photos to council, which are illustrative of the 10 points I'm going to cover tonight regarding the need to continue the presence of the Chevron station in Edgemont Village. These 10 photos are in no particular order, but one, the official community plan that you have adopted forecasts an increase of cars in the village due to development within the town center. You're already seeing increases in traffic and congestion in the village. And where are all these vehicles going to be serviced? We're increasing the number of cars and we're decreasing the available uses for these cars. 2, the availability of diesel fuel for private cars and commercial vehicles. The Chevron station is the only source for diesel, non-ethanol 94 octane fuel, and 3 other octanes, 87, 89, and 91. The availability of private, secure, separate washrooms for customers and the general public. Propane tank services for RVs and barbecues. Sales of auto-related products like washer fluid, antifreeze, motor oil, etc. Full service pumps, important for seniors and people with disabilities. If the district is truly interested in making life easier for older people, then this full service feature must be retained. 24-hour services for air, for tires, and inflatables. You'd note that a portion of the proceeds for these services are donated to local charities. Services for non-automotive accessories, lawnmowers, chainsaws, outboard and inboard boat putters. Storage for on-site storage for customer vehicles. At least 15 on-site spaces are available. And available space is adaptable for future charging stations for EV cars, trucks, and service vehicles. All of these 10 community assets would disappear if our only service station was closed. Do not allow this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Corey Kosk. It's about 3 years, I think, since.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's nice to be back to see people face to face. I wonder if the slide could be, the first slide could be made visible.
So yeah, this was your presentation. So,
Yes, right.
so yeah, Genevieve will just screen share it
Okay,
from there, so it'll show up on there.
excellent. Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. So, okay.
Sorry, and just before you go, Corey, let's make sure we can get the presentation out.
Okay.
And that screen, there you go.
If you can make that full screen, that would be even
Might
better.
need to do that
but-
within the program on your desk there.
To the width.
Hmm.
Hmm,
Okay, well, that's
okay.
as big as it's gonna get. Okay,
Anyway,
welcome, Dr. Cost.
good evening, Your Worship, Member of Council. My name is Corey Cost, and I'm making this presentation on my own behalf, as well as Louise Nagel of our Community Association. So you see a picture before you of Edgemont Boulevard in 1946. Of course, there's nothing much there. But 10 years later, you'll see 3 gas stations there, if you look very carefully. And the 4th one was added sometime after the 70s, I believe, on Woodbine. So I'm here to lobby on behalf of our association to retain this particular and the last remaining of 4 gas station. Stats Canada indicated, maybe the next slide can be there. I don't know how to advance on this thing. I think we'll just do it this way.
There you go.
I think the customers' demand for a complete community is what's driving the retention of this gas station. Stats Canada indicated an increase in gasoline sales of 4.1% from 2020 to 2021. And I have it a good authority that this particular gas station sells considerably more fuel than the average Metro gas station. Let's face it, sooner or later, however, the vast majority of us will likely purchase an electric vehicle. Note that the electric cars are rather expensive and currently in short supply. A good case can be made that if your existing car is less than 10 years old, or you've driven less than 24,000 kilometers and drive a reasonable sized car, let's say a Honda Civic, then it's might be better for the environment to hold on to that old car for another 3 or 4 years. There's a very readable article, which I gave a link to, which is well worth reading. So in the meantime, we need a service to service our own gas-driven vehicles. Local service has many obvious advantages. This particular station has 3 service bays, some say 2, but I think there's 3, run by a valued member of our community with a reputation of honesty and taking the extra mile to solve auto problems. He is a member of the local business association, has supported animal rescue efforts, the Boy Scouts annual manure drive. Just see the storyboard of the dogs hanging in the station. The elderly of our community are unlikely to be the 2% that use a bike for commuting, which currently constitute about 1%. If you'll bear with me, Your Worship, I'll just finish the last 2 sentences.
Thank you.
About 1% of the total kilometers driven by our community. They are seniors, the elderly, more than any other, depend on the local service station. The feedback to the news of the possible sale of this service station to the Edgemont and Upper Capilano Community Association has been quite clear. Please keep the station. So my summary is this, I'll repeat. Please keep this station, at least for the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We still have some time. Would anybody else like to address the council? Yes? Nicole Hebert, correct?
Yes.
Yes, there we go.
Mayor Mike Little. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and councilor members, for being here and speaking with the public. Up to about a year ago, I had zero interest in district council meetings or anything, but then with the last election, I was hired to do some art to promote the council members. And I thought, I don't even know these people. I should really get to know people before I start making a decision. And as I was in the community doing the art, I was asking everyone their opinion on the mayor and the council members. And from the response I got for you, is the reason I did not have your name on the ballot last year. And I just want to say that I think I made the wrong decision. I think you're doing a wonderful job. And I also think everyone on the council is doing a wonderful job. And it's been really nice getting to know you all. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to address the meeting? And just double checking virtual hands, any of the virtual attendees wishing to address the meeting, just raise your virtual hand. I see none. Okay, so thank you very much. We're going to move on with the rest of the agenda for the evening. And tonight we have a delegation planned. And so we have a delegation coming to us from YWCA Metro Vancouver. So I'm going to ask delegates to come up and take over the area here. And while they're doing that, I'm just going to describe what a delegation is versus public input. So we have an opportunity within our system for members that represent community organizations to apply to have a slightly different speaking opportunity. They get to speak for up to 5 minutes. And then after they're done with their presentation for 5 minutes, then members of the council are allowed to ask them follow-up questions before we receive the delegation formally at this point. So at this point, I'm going to welcome you here, and it would be great if you could introduce your delegation for the record. Would be great. Thank you.
I will do that. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mayor Little and council members. My name is Erin Seeley. I'm the CEO of YWCA Metro Vancouver. I'm joined by a delegation. I'll get them to introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Shauna Short. I am project lead of YWCA City Shift Project.
I guess for the microphone, I'll introduce Amy Yushka. She's our Director of Communications and Advocacy. Dana Boyd, she's Executive Assistant to the CEO. And our board chair, Val Mann, is also here, volunteer board chair from YWCA Metro Vancouver.
Dana being a former district person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Happy to have her here.
Welcome.
Thank you all for the opportunity. I want to be starting off by also acknowledging the territories that we're operating on, the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish Nation. And I'm really excited to give you an overview of our work today. The City Shift Project is a call to action. We're here to talk to you about it. We're also here to ask for your support in a pilot initiative to put it into practice. It's a way for local governments essentially to prioritize and embed social equity across municipal decision-making. That sounds academic, but really it's about how do you reach all of the community members in your policy and processes? How do you hear from those voices you're not hearing in the meetings today, or the voices who may not regularly be engaging with council in ensuring that you're representing all communities in your decisions? I want to recognize before we get into the slides that the District of North Vancouver is already doing a lot of work in equity. You have a social equity lens paper, and it's clear that it's an important part of your thinking in your official community plan. Our hope is that by sharing more about this project, you'll be able to deepen that work and take some practical tools to apply it. YWCA, I'll give you a little bit of background first on our organization. We're 125 plus years old, and while a lot of the work remains the same, the direction and mission are really shifting to ensure that we're representing the diverse members in terms of the clients we serve. Our mission is to advance gender equity alongside women, families, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people through advocacy and integrated services that help support personal, collective, and economic well-being. I'm here to talk about the advocacy part of that work, but in addition, we have a number of projects and programs: housing, childcare, youth programs, employment services, anti-violence programs, and many more, including on the North Shore, 2 housing communities, and operating a Work BC Center with North Vancouver Multicultural Services Society. In the advocacy side, the YWCA City Shift Project is an opportunity to ask municipalities directly to incorporate diverse perspectives in your planning, to consider the needs of all citizens, and to move toward a more equitable framework for applying the authorities you have in the bylaws, in the processes, and in the outcomes that you're achieving in the community. What we're here tonight to talk about specifically is the Kickstart Guide. We have hard copies for you. We're happy to leave behind, as well as a digital version. And this is a toolkit that adds to the resources that you may already be using on equitable city building. It's based on case studies and emerging best practices from other municipalities who've been leading the way in this work. And we want to challenge assumptions in terms of who you're serving and encourage you to ask different questions in your planning. Equity tools, such as the ones outlined in the Kickstart Guide, ask you to consider the diverse views and the potential impacts of your work, both positive and negative, as you move forward, and they address systemic inequities in supporting your decisions. So to the roadmap, the Kickstart Guide contains a pretty straightforward way to be able to take concrete steps to do this work. The first is defining what equity means in your community, identifying some benchmarks. We know that what gets measured gets counted, and that's what matters. Operationalizing equity work and choosing an implementation methodology, and we have a practical suggestion for that, as well as seeking input and feedback, committing long-term, and really embedding the equity in the council decision-making. So one tool to consider is gender-based analysis plus. This is a tool that the provincial and federal governments are already using. The plus is an indication that it's not just about differences between genders. It's about multiple characteristics that intersect and contribute to who we are as community members and how we experience a given situation. And there's questions in the Kickstart Guide that help you understand how to apply GBA plus. Things like, what assumptions are you making in your work? Who could be left behind? What voices are you not hearing? Who did you consult? What data did you look at? And how are you ensuring the equality of outcomes? We've been meeting with many city staff members and municipalities across Metro Vancouver and feeling like this Kickstart Guide is a way to bring you together. We know staff are doing tremendous work. We know that you're really leading in your direction. And this guide gives you additional resources that you can be embedding for the future in your strategic framework, in your ongoing work as you plan for the city of, for the District of North Vancouver. So in the social equity lens paper, you've got a recommendation to advance social equity. We ask that you consider how you could apply a lens like GBA plus as your organizational strategic framework. And in particular, consider a pilot project where you could apply a lens like GBA plus, make it a priority in your city, and use the resources that we're happy to offer in terms of workshops and support from the YWCA City Shift team to test out this model and look at how it can create more equitable outcomes in your planning. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm going to be looking to Councillor Lisa Murray. You have a comment?
Thank you for your presentation. I'll move receipt of the delegation.
So moved. Is there a seconder on receipt? Second by Councillor Back. Councillor Murray, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation and welcome everybody. Welcome back, Dana. Very interesting information. And yes, we are doing a lot of work and our partner agencies are doing a lot of work in this regard as well. I'm wondering if you looked at, when we talk about are we reaching everybody, are you aware that we had one of the lowest turnouts in municipal elections in the region in years? Ours was 22%. And did you look into any of the reasons why that may have happened? Have you gone into sort of the communication aspect or what's changed over the last maybe 10 years in regards to the disengagement of people from local government? Did you look into that at all?
We didn't look into the election specifically, but what the City Shift project did in the beginning was a comparative analysis around municipalities in Metro Vancouver, and it looked at a whole bunch of data sets, including those who are participating in the processes, things like hearings, things like the planning sessions, charades, and the approaches that cities are using in their planning. And while there were, I think, opportunities through the pandemic to be able to offer availability to more through the virtual world, it's clear through the data that low participation is not unique to the district, and in fact it's increasing across.
Yeah.
And that also drove us to looking at a different lens, because you're not likely to get the voices of different perspectives, the diverse community members, the number of newcomers in your community through the traditional processes. So this is that way to challenge the thinking, and in your day-to-day work, looking at different processes may then have an upturn in how individuals feel comfortable to engage and whether they'll take that through to the ballot box at election time.
Did you give consideration that it might not be the local municipalities, but how they're receiving information in the community? Did you uncover any?
We haven't looked at that in detail, but we're happy to help. That could be an excellent pilot project, is just unpacking that, because I think while the advent of technology gives you advantages, it also can be isolating and it can be limiting in itself. So that's a chance to apply this lens and ask that question: who's missing and who are you not seeing and who's not participating in the election process?
Have you looked at the levels of volunteerism in British Columbia, the Lower Mainland, across the country, and your other organizations? No.
We, not through City Shift, we certainly know as an organization based on volunteers, we've
You're losing
experienced
volunteers.
significant decline. It's a major piece of our strategy as well to increase volunteerism, and that's changing across.
Super difficult. So we're feeling all the impacts of all of that. And I was just at a session. Can I just talk for 1 minute?
Yes.
You can put my timer on if you want. Dana, don't laugh. I was just at a session recently where we were speaking with the media, well-known journalists, and how in the old days, when Mr. Koss first started nearly 30 years ago, sitting in this chamber, there was a newspaper that landed on our doorstep on local issues called the North Shore News 3 times a week. And those papers and even regional papers like the Vancouver Sun and the Province that landed on a doorstep that everybody read could ultimately determine the course of an election. But there's so many outlets of information now. People aren't sure actually what they're reading. There's so much, it's not necessarily local, that it's hard to focus them on, local municipal politics versus provincial and federal. And then the other interesting thing that was discussed was the future, and that is AI, artificial intelligence, and what that is going to do to the changing landscape of volunteering and communication. So, I think this is just a people issue of being able to focus people on, a few things like the old days did versus, I think it was the number that was quoted was 200 million websites around the world for information, like 200 million news platforms, communication platforms. It's just information overload and people are overwhelmed. So I would be interested in, a pilot opportunity to look at, maybe it's not us, but maybe it's how information is being disseminated. Plus, the cost of living these days, it takes a lot more for people to, just make a decent living to live anywhere in this country. And the time that it takes to volunteer is becoming more finite. So thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Back, you seconded the motion. Did you have comments right now?
Just a brief comment. Thank you very much for the presentation. This is really important work, and I'm really glad that you're leading this and helping municipalities with this work. Excuse me. I was just looking at the deck that you provided and some of the areas to consider for pilot projects. And what would be the YWCA's role if we were to say pick community consultation process as one area? How would we get that going, and what would the YWCA's role be, if any, kind of helping us improve that?
That's a great one to pick, actually, because
Okay.
it's part of what we're doing is working with a number of advisors through a strategic council. Some of them are researchers, and they actually have funding to look at issues like public hearing and consultation. So we would be happy to facilitate workshops through CityShip that bring together some of those council members, some of that expertise, and hear from you in what's important in terms of process, and then look
Yeah.
at how to apply that equity framework to it. So is there a way through that GBA plus lens that you could attract different voices to the council proceedings? Is there a different way you could use the communications media to disseminate information? I think absolutely through the knowledge building, and then, talking from there about how to practically apply it. And the potential in terms of our involvement is learning and scaling more broadly too. So with your leadership in an area like that, we think there's broad application.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's an area that I would definitely be interested in, supportive of a pilot for. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Aaron, and your team for the presentation. Two quick questions. In terms of doing a pilot, do we need to start with benchmarking first? And then the second, just looking at the areas for a pilot, the one that I think is near to dear to a lot of members on council, especially myself, is the municipal housing plan. I used to work at BC Housing. we have a lot of engagements with different groups and groups that are challenged to find housing. And now I'm working with Success Affordable Housing. So, working with a lot of immigrants and new Canadians. I'm just wondering, the second question is, how could a pilot work in terms of the municipal housing plan? Like, do you have some experience with other municipalities on that?
The guide includes some examples of how other municipalities have used the lens. And so I think before benchmarking, it's important to define equity. That's kind of the basis, is what are you seeking to measure and what's the outcome? If it's a diverse housing program, then you want to be able to set that as your goal from the beginning. So that's your why and your what, and then your how is really using that lens to see how can you get the voices of those who are underhoused or unhoused in your community. And those are often different approaches. And YWCA, we have direct experience in providing housing for single mothers and families, knowing that you're not going to see many single moms at a council meeting, and you're not going to be able to necessarily hear from them in the traditional processes. So in the process of how you build that plan, it's about asking how can you get the diverse voices to give you their input, so that when you go to build the policies and do the programming, you're not just reflecting the loudest voices or the voices you always hear from. You're really trying to get at. Sometimes that's different ways. Sometimes it's in person. Sometimes it's one-on-one and taking different approaches to consultation. And it's not always easy. So I think housing is a big one to start with, but it's on the mind of many municipalities. And it's exactly the example where our seniors considered, our families considered, our children considered in housing. One example that's near and dear for us is how many one-bedroom units get built relative to what the demand is. The demand tends to be more for family, multi-generational housing now, and that's just not coming through in the plans. So with a GBA plus lens, the hope is that that will give you the output that better reflects the breadth and the complexity of the community you're serving.
Thank you very much. I also sit on the board for TransLink for the Mayor's Council, and they definitely have taken this into account in our consultation, specifically going out and reaching groups that are underrepresented in the groups that we seek input from. I'd have to say they've really been a regional leader in doing that, specifically under the TransLink main board. And it's a challenge for us in one sense, in that we have different types of relationships in our community. For many of our services, our relationship is by law with the property owner, right? And so they get the tax bill, they get the notices, they get, when the hearings and such go out, we have a statutory relationship with them. But so many of our services, it is just residents, generally speaking, people who are, whether they're renters, leaseholders, different types of models, whether they're here semi-temporarily, students studying locally, or other such things. They all get captured in those general services. And so we can become complacent in going after our landowners, because we have a very easy, clear, direct line of communication because of our tax process, and not also go and ask to groups that are not necessarily captured in that. I have a fairly high level of confidence that some of our agencies, like our library services, I know from my time as the chair of the library board, that we were very careful about trying to go out and not just petition our users, but specifically go out to underrepresented groups to get ideas for how we could change the services of the library and make them more appropriate. Our goal always was to be have barrier-free access to high-quality public resources, and make sure that people felt that they could use the service no matter their situation. I'm optimistic that as we went through COVID, we started to move more of our systems online, which make it so that somebody's working 2 jobs, somebody maybe looking after kids, maybe can't show up at a council meeting necessarily, but they have more access to some of the virtual services. And I fully support us continuing that and expanding that. When we petitioned around the North Shore for committees that could operate in a committee space that could operate a fully hybrid meeting, turns out the district has the only 2 meeting rooms that can do that right now. And so the Advisory Committee on Disabilities Issues meets out of this facility, but we also can use the hybrid services that are out of here. And so I think all of the municipalities around are going to have to look at how they access their own community. It's not just going to be on Monday night with the people who could potentially come and sit for an evening. It's going to be trying to reach out to people who aren't necessarily able to do that because of their work-life situation. And so I was going to just wrap up, but Councillor Pope, I see you raise your hand, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be really quick. I actually took the GBA Plus course a couple of years ago when I was with the BC Human Rights Commission, or maybe it was the Industry Training Authority. I think it was, yes, sorry. And I would just like to highly recommend it to everybody. It's a great starting point, and I was just checking online to see whether it's free. I think it's still free. And it would be wonderful if we could, I don't know, suggest to our staff and fellow counselors that we take the course. It's fast. It doesn't take very long, and it's a real eye-opener, and I highly recommend it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council, we've moved and seconded the recommendation to receive the delegation. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Thank you very much for your presentation
Thank
today.
you.
On behalf of the council, thank you for coming out and the work that you do in our community. We appreciate it. Good to see old friends. There you go. So we have several items up for consideration today with the, sorry, I'm on the minutes somehow. There we go. Up for this evening's meeting. I noted as I was going through the agenda that items 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3 are all up for adoption, not for debate. And I believe we had consensus on the previous iterations of this, so I'm going to put those forward as being for consent. 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3. Would anybody like to pull any of those items out of consent? Hearing none, will someone move the second the consent agenda? Second by Councillor Back. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Items 1, 2, and 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3 have just been passed by the council. So now we're going to move on to item 8.4. This is the amendments to the use of voting recorders at elections bylaw. And I have to say, I didn't find that title really got to the nut of what this is about. And so I'm going to ask the clerk to maybe describe that, what this is really about.
Yes, thank you. Through your worship, this amendment to the use of voting recorders at election bylaw seeks to change the time that the chief election officer may begin processing mail ballots that have been returned on general voting day. Currently, we're not able to start opening mail ballots until 8 p.m. This would authorize the chief election officer to start processing them at 12 p.m. on general voting day.
Okay, moved by Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder on? Second by Councillor Ma. Okay, any discussion?
No, just common sense, and it allows you
Yeah, I
to
would
get
say
ahead of
that,
the game.
You know, it certainly gives no one competitive advantage. The results wouldn't be released in advance. It just means that staff won't be overwhelmed in that critical time once the ballot box is closed with additionally having to deal with the mail-in ballots. They will have already been able to process those.
And although the title of the report really didn't get to the crux of the issue, certainly the highlighted yellow and green
There you go.
did. I haven't seen that in a report before, but very effective. We might want to implement that in other reports. Thank you.
Okay, it's been
Ms.
moved
Lund.
and seconded. I see no further comments. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item up is a council motion. This is the NVDPL electric cargo and utility bike share pilot program. Councillor Back, if you'd like to make your motion, and we'll get a seconder, and then we can have discussion on the item.
Sure, I will move the recommendation in the
Seconded.
report.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Pope. Go ahead, Councillor Back. Your
Thank you, Your
comments.
Worship. And each chance I get to talk about electric bikes and combined with libraries, I'm going to definitely take that opportunity. This is fairly well described, I think, in the report. It's a fairly basic concept, although it's not something that we've seen before in our community. And it is the notion of launching a pilot program to lend cargo bikes, electric cargo and utility bikes. So they are a specific style of electric bikes, as outlined in the report. This would be a 2-year pilot program that we would launch out of the main Lynn Valley branch of the library. And we would have up to 4 of these electric cargo bikes. Could be a combination of the box bike style as well as the long tail, and a trike style electric bike, which would help and cater to people with physical limitations. So this, the library is where we chose to, and I say we because the idea was brought forward through the community. And I do want to thank and recognize Duncan Wilcox, who's with us here tonight. Libraries lend things and they're experts at it. And for a long time, they've been lending a lot more than just traditional library materials. They lend things like radon detectors and community carrying kits. And through the pandemic, especially, we saw how libraries can pivot and lead the charge in a lot of different areas. So from that perspective, libraries made great sense as a place to try a program like this. These cargo bikes are rather costly, and that's one of the limitations that people have in many cases from trying them, is that there just aren't a lot of places to go and try, for instance, one of these box bikes. So by piloting a program like this, people will be able to go and sign them out. They just need their library card. They can go sign one out for potentially up to a week and really see how a cargo bike could fit into their lifestyle, like literally fit into their lifestyle, their garage. Their, part of the challenge with these bikes is they are quite large. Because the libraries would take ownership of these bikes, this is an opportunity that we could offer a lot of people on an ongoing basis. So differing from a previous motion that I brought forward around an e-bike incentive. And so really provides barrier-free access to these types of electric bikes. We do have, as you know, an e-bike share service in our community run by Lime Bikes. This is very different from that. Lime Bikes are not cargo bikes. They're just a standard e-bike, which work well for a lot of purposes, but the cargo bikes do serve a different purpose. They are very much a second car replacer. I know that I found in my own use of my electric cargo bike, it has replaced over 50% of the trips that I would have taken with a vehicle before. So when you're carrying stuff, be it groceries or small humans, the cargo bikes serve that purpose very well. So lots of details to be worked out. One of the details obviously would be the funding. We're proposing in the report up to $60,000 for the 2-year pilot, but the reality is there is additional funding available through the Clean BC program. The SUVI funding would provide up to $1,700 per bike. That would be all of these bikes would qualify for under that funding stream. We would also look to partner with a local bike shop. So in this case, we've already been in discussions with a couple of local bike shops who would be very interested in taking on the service, because the libraries, they want to make sure that in between lending anything, that item is in working order. So I think a partnership with a bike shop in this case would make a lot of sense. So that's sort of high level what the program would look like. We have said summer 2023 because I would love to see it launch this summer in Lynn Valley with some kind of a launch event where we invite families out with bikes. We celebrate cycling in Lynn Valley and do it right there at the library. And we would be one of the first libraries to pilot a program like this, although I know that there's some interest in the city of North Vancouver. And as much as I'm all about collaboration in this particular instance, I'd love to be the ones leading the charge on it. So that's the Coles notes on it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pope, your comments.
Thank you very much. I wholeheartedly endorse Councillor Back's motion for the cargo bikes. It's been a real eye-opener for me in the last 6 months to really grasp the extent of what cargo bikes are all about and what e-bikes are all about, and how they are completely transforming people's lives on the North Shore. Actually, last weekend I had dinner with a longtime Lynn Valley residents, and they were like, what is with all these bike lanes, and why do we really need this? And and I started talking about the e-bikes, and they said, yeah, but you can't take an e-bike to get your groceries. And I said, well, actually you can. You get a cargo bike and you can go pick up some groceries with that. Yeah, but you can't take your kids to school on an e-bike. Well, actually you can on a cargo bike, and people do, just like Jordan, to daycare. So I think creating awareness through a pilot program like this is really important to our community in the future for moving towards more active transportation and making people aware of the options that are available to them to replace the car. Of course, is a huge goal of the district. And those are my comments.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Pope. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to support the motion, and I thank you, Councillor Beck, for bringing it forward. I thank you for the very detailed report, which I enjoyed and it had a lot of very useful information. Perhaps it's the lawyer in me, but just following up on your theme of there's many details to be worked out. One of those details that I didn't see addressed in the report, but there must be a way of addressing it, is liability issues. As you mentioned, they're quite a large structure. I know enough about, as a personal injury, I know enough to know that if large, heavy things are moving around, accidents are going to happen. Injuries are going to occur, and there'll be liability issues arising out of it. So I just raised that. We obviously need to have a system in place that does two things: protects the district from liability flowing from careless use of these objects, but also from my perspective, in terms of social justice, ensures that there is compensation to people who are injured through the negligent operation of these devices, which could occur. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Councillor Back. I believe council wants to encourage district residents to engage in a mode shift to address mobility issues and challenges from climate change. We need to invest and test ways to help people make that transition. Putting in a connected network of mobility lanes, not just bike lanes, is one step. This pilot is another. If we do nothing or the same thing, we're not going to get different results. So I think this pilot is worth investing in. As the counselor on the library board, I will lend my voice of support at the next board meeting. I think it's later this month. Relatively speaking, the cost is not too high. Similar to Councillor Hanson, I did kind of look at some details, and I expect more to come. The one point that I would probably want to look at is that the cost of repairs are covered by the library partner. I'm glad that there's a potential partnership with some bike stores, so hopefully that will address that or help mitigate that. But overall, I support this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miri.
Thank you, Mayor Little. So has the library been consulted with this? Like, has it gone to the board?
Okay.
So we have had conversations with our Director of Library Services, a number of conversations with Ms. Van Dyke. She's talked to her senior management team about it as well. So they actually have talked through a lot of the high level details and some of the concerns, and liability is certainly one of the issues that we're going to have to work through, but there are some solutions there. And then our transportation staff are in the loop as well. And I can tell you that should this be supported tonight, they're excited to get into some of those details and work them out in conjunction with the library staff.
So I'm just curious about the process. Like, if this is a library project, that's something the library is going to support, wouldn't this just be something that they could implement on their own without it coming here? Because it says it would be facilitated by the District North Vancouver Public Libraries, and they are a separate board. They have a separate, they already blend stuff. You've gone through a list of those items. So why is it coming to this council when it should just go straight to the library? And if there's other venues that want to consider it as well, I know there was a comment about the Rec Commission, for instance. If the Rec Commission wanted to accommodate? I mean, I know we have the Lime bike borrowing program, but that's a business. Is there a business model for cargo bikes anywhere? Like, is there like a Lime?
There are other parts of the world. I don't think, and I can't say for certain, but I don't believe in North America there's a cargo bike business model like that.
Like
And
if the
your other point-
library is going to take this on, then I would want them to be the ones to make the decision whether or not they want to take this on. And they would have to work out the issues of the liability is. I mean, I guess the first thing that I thought about is, you know, a trike is one thing, a bike isn't, not like there's different cargo, you know, and some people are comfortable, you know, using one and other people's to learn to ride to drive a cargo bike, you know, that would take a different level of skill and confidence. And you know, what training would there be to be able to just borrow it? Like, it's not like just taking out a book. You'd have to know how to maneuver it, you know, weight distribution, that kind of thing. So I think this would be something that the board of the District of North Vancouver Public Libraries would have to make a decision with. And certainly if there was, you know, you talked about the city of North Vancouver, are they considering this tonight as well, or? Oh, they're not, okay. So if there was a library share program for a cargo bike, maybe they should talk about it first before we make a decision. I just don't feel comfortable making a decision for the library board.
Yeah, so I totally, well, can I respond or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just say, I totally
Questions,
hear
Chief?
you, Councillor Murray. We do want to make this, I think this is bigger than just the library, and that's why I'm bringing it here first. Because it is very non-traditional, and it's bigger than any other item that they would be lending. But of course, we need the library board to be able to have their say, and as Councillor Moss kindly said, he'll present it at their next board meeting. So I think we want to be able to have support of both council and the library so that we can kind of do this in conjunction and really, because it does align with so many of the district's objectives and plans, I think it does make sense for us to have a role in implementing it, because there's going to be a lot more than we can get out of this than just lending out the bikes. We're going to learn about the people that are using these bikes, how they're using them, where they're going on them, that could lead to some future policy decisions, I think. And
So I would be, thank you for that, Councillor Beck. So I would be supportive of forwarding this to the library board, because I wouldn't want to presuppose the outcome of something that they're going to take on by us making a decision prior to letting them talk about it on their own. So I think this should be forwarded to the next, when is the next board meeting? Okay, so 3 weeks. So we could just like maybe an amendment that this could be forwarded to the next public libraries board meeting for their consideration. And then once they talk about it, then it could come back to us if they were supportive, or any of the concerns that they would have at that meeting, send it back to us, and then we could, you know, go further from there and give direction to staff. Is that something that's?
Yeah, I think that you could, I mean, I don't think you need to alter the wording that's on here, but you could just add a clause that says, and that this matter be referred to the NVDPL board for their consideration.
I don't want to add another step of it coming back here. I think a big concern is budget for the library. This does represent, you know, a decent amount on their budget. But I'm okay with approving it tonight and referring it to them. It wouldn't have to come back to council after that.
But are we giving the library sort of like, if we, like, what are we being asked to support?
Well, it still would
Just a
have to- sorry,
report.
The wording says that it would be reporting back to council under either case, or it'd be the council directs staff to report back under either case. So I don't think it would delay it if you just added a clause that said
It should
that
be
the matter be
forwarded
referred to the
library.
NVDPL board
Sure.
for their
Yeah,
consideration.
I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen anyways.
Okay, is that accepted as an amendment for the mover and the seconder, that it would be referred to the library board for their consideration? Okay. Councilor Murray, your
Yeah,
comments are done?
that's fine. I
Okay.
think it should go to them first, though.
Thank you. Councilor Beck, did you have additional comments for your second time speaking?
Note, well, just to say that all of the concerns that have been mentioned around the table tonight have been looked at by both our staff and the library staff, and they're all being worked on. Staff are just waiting for council support. And so thank you very much to everyone for your support tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. In general, I'm a active transportation supporter. I have a couple of questions though on this. I read some of the links that were in your report, Councillor Back, and they're all in the United States. But what they seem to emphasize, most of them emphasized, is it was partnerships that were done. It was no one body that kind of took it on themselves. You mentioned that you've talked to some bike shops about this. That brings up another question for me. I'm always in the back of my head telling myself that it's in the charter that we can't support individual businesses. And that line seems to be getting kind of gray and fuzzy for me. And I kind of think that if something like this is being set up, why wouldn't a business shop, if we're talking only 2 or 3, why wouldn't a business take this up and partner with somebody? I mean, you know, they have that in their inventory. They could loan it out. It would bring them more business. I just don't understand why it's coming to a municipal government. The other thing is for people who may want to buy, I noticed Canadian Tire has cargo trailers for 100, starting at $150. It's the bike that's expensive. It's not the cargo trailer that's expensive. So I'm concerned about that gray line of it. We appear to be supporting a particular type of business or a particular business. I know this discussion came up before on the e-bike conversation, on the green line bike conversation as well. So maybe that can be clarified by somebody to me because I'm worried about that. By partnering too, they also, a lot of the partners already had infrastructure for storage, for docking, that kind of thing. So that wouldn't, if it was a partnership with a business and a nonprofit or something, that just seems a more appropriate place for this to be. Student government associations at universities are sponsoring this kind of thing because they want to have bikes to go around university, and that makes total sense to me. In the concerns that I have, though, are the liability that's already been mentioned, and getting people to sign waivers that if there's damage, they're responsible for it, or if there's injury, they're responsible for it. And if they damage the bike, that they'd be responsible for it. So there are some concerns in there, and I can't give 100% for this. I think it's an excellent idea, but I don't think it's necessarily an excellent idea in the municipality being, or the library for that matter, being the partner. And when I went and looked at our transportation and land use strategy, where we decided on what would have high, medium, and low impacts by 2050, this was low. And out of roughly 15, this was low. So I'm not seeing this as a good thing necessarily for the municipality to get into, but I would be happy to encourage bicycle business. Bring this up and run it past them and see if any of them would like, maybe 2 shops would like to get together and each donate a couple of bikes and do it that way. So I'm not in favor of this, but I also agree with Councillor Murray that I don't think it's our decision anyway. If it's going to be run by the library, it would have to go through the library board.
Yeah, just my own comments on it. I'm fully willing to try something like this. I think I don't want to presuppose what staff will have to come back with. I heard the challenges that I think Councillor Back, you've acknowledged on liability and such already. You know, we also have to check in, you know, whether or not there's what our agreement with Lime is, and whether or not we're allowed to bring in a competitor, whether or not the library can manage, can be comfortable with the kind of risk. I went back, not to say I was stymied by the library, but I tried to bring in non-written collection when I was the chair of the library board to get those engravers, so that, you know, people buy it once, but they go around and write their driver's license on their bikes and everything all in one day, and then they're sitting there with this tool at their house that they're probably never going to use again. And so it seemed like good fodder for having be part of the collection, something that someone's only going to use for a short period of time and then return it back. And you know, the library was not comfortable with the risk of having to maintain the engravers and risk of potential damage to people's items that they're going to be engraving on and such. And so in the end, they decided not to support it, but they have since added a bunch of non-book collection pieces, like, well, some of them not technical. You can go get a puzzle if you want to in there, and you can go get, you know, the radon detector with a program with the provincial government as well. So they've done some other things since that time. So, but I do think it's critically important that the library as a partner is asked up front and has a role in that, because they need to tell us whether we're barking up the wrong tree. If they're not the right agency to do this, then we should be starting from as early a point possible with a different agency like Recreation Commission, or instead, as you say, maybe the staff would come back and say this would probably be better to sponsor through a private business. I mean, we've got bike shop right across the street. Or Lime, you know, maybe we can convince Lime to put some cargo bikes into the mix. All that to say, I'm presupposing what the staff report may say. I'm supportive of it going to staff to report back on it and find out what the challenges are going to be and what we need to do to overcome them. But I do think that we do have a role in making the community aware of options. And I think it can be done in a way that doesn't specifically benefit one particular business or another particular business. It can be done to sort of promote general e-mobility within the community. But there are some challenges. You know, when the district here, we have an e-bike that staff can book out to be able to go but before you take the e-bike out, you have to do the training program. That's one of the district requirements to manage the liability, is that a staff person goes with you. They go over all of the parts. They go over, you know, the basic functions and watch you start. Because for somebody who's never been on an e-bike before, that first time acceleration kicks in, it can be a little surprising for them. Best to do it their first run while supervised. And so all of those issues are need to be addressed, but I think staff are completely capable of reporting back on that as we move forward on this. But I do think it's critically important that we talk to the library. So I appreciate that you guys have accepted that as a referral early on. But I'll be supportive of the motion. Councillor Forbes, is that from before? Your hands from before? Okay. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Maybe the CAO can clean up that gray line that I have in my head that we can appear to be supporting, because we could certainly do flyers. We could certainly say something on the tax bill. We could certainly have communications work on getting the information out to our community that there is such a thing as a cargo bike. So I don't necessarily think that nobody's going to hear about it if we don't get 3 or 4 bikes here at the hall or at the library. So maybe you could explain that fine gray line.
If it was simple a matter, Your Worship, through to Councillor Forbes, if it was simply a matter of contracting with some bike shops to maintain the bikes on our behalf, we would just have to make sure we go through our procurement process to make sure that it was fairly awarded, and it could be awarded to more than one. Any other kind of a formal relationship with the private sector, we'd have to really take a good hard look at to make sure we didn't get into issues like that.
But to be clear, the legislation, the community charter, when it's talking about giving assistance to a business, it's more or less talking about taxes, leases, all of those kinds of forms of assistance. You can do other forms of assistance, and you can do a partnership agreement with a private business. So that's one of the things in the clause, is that it does allow you to have a partnership with a private business. You just can't give them rent relief or many of the other things. But it is available as an option. If you needed to partner with a business to maintain them, you could do that, because I don't think the library obviously internally has that expertise. Again, we wouldn't specifically promote a particular business and send customers to their door necessarily. That would be an awkward position for us to be in. But yes, you can contract services just like our fleet vehicles out there. We have a contract for a company that maintains and cleans them, and that's okay. You're allowed to do those kinds of services as well.
Maybe I could just ask Counselor Back for a clarification then. What is your hope at the end of the 2-year pilot? Like, are you seeing this as an ongoing, the district will build up a fleet of cargo bikes, or are you seeing it that it's just an educational awareness thing that we would do for the public, and then hopefully we let the public then take over?
I think there's any number of things that could happen as we learn and are informed by the pilot. We could look at expanding into other branches. We have 3 branches of our libraries.
But what do you want out of it in the end? Do you want the district to maintain a fleet of cargo bikes?
No, in terms of the maintenance piece, it would be a partnership, like a maintenance contract is how I envision it, with a local bike shop.
But are you wanting a fleet that's separate from ownership by the district?
If I may, I think Councillor Forbes is asking, is the end goal education and awareness about cargo bikes in their facility, or is the end goal to have an accessible fleet of bikes within the community for people to get?
It's education and awareness is the #1 piece here.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further speakers on the matter, so I'm going to call.
Can I just ask about the motions, but does it say that you were going to forward?
Oh, let's be clear about that.
Yes, thank you. It was taken as a friendly amendment with the consent of the mover and the seconder. So this resolution and report would be forwarded to the NV, the matter be forwarded to the District North Vancouver Library Board for consideration.
No, it's all one.
The library board, it's just going to be on one board. So a report, or we will go to the library board to determine whether they want.
I would just send Councillor Back's report to them for consideration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rather than waiting for the staff report and then sending it to the library, but yeah.
Yes, thank you, sir, for clarification. It'll be the resolution with the accompanying council report.
Okay. All right. Call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, council. We don't normally finish this promptly, but we do have an opportunity for reports from council or staff. And just wondering, Mr. Stewart, do you have any reports that you'd like to make? Okay, do any members of council have any reports that they would like to make? I see Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. Over the last number of months, I have, in this year, since January 2023, I have attended a number of meetings as a representative of this body on the Heritage Advisory Committee, and it's very interesting work that I believe is about to be done with respect to initiatives to try and protect more heritage in the district. Certainly that's going to be my voice in my participation with the Heritage Advisory Committee. But I did want to highlight the fact that on June the 5th, 2023, that is to say, the Heritage Advisory Committee is organizing a heritage tour, and that will be for this council. And I do hope there's a regular council meeting beginning that night at 7 o'clock, and we anticipate the heritage tour would start at 5 o'clock. So I do hope that council will put that in their diary and show up to what I think will be a very interesting evening of heritage here in the district. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Back, a report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to note my attendance at a couple of events last week on Tuesday, March the 28th, along with yourself, Your Worship, at the North Shore Sport Awards. They were presenting the awards from 2020, because that was one of the last events before the whole world shut down. And then they were presenting, of course, this year's awards. So great to celebrate the accomplishments of athletes and coaches and the parent community across the North Shore and teachers. And then on Thursday night, I attended a safety meeting of the Canyon Heights Elementary Parent Advisory Council, along with Councillor Ma. And a copy of their presentation was forwarded to all of us, but a number of ongoing safety concerns there, which some of them we are making some progress on. But we had Brendan James from our transportation staff there to hear the concerns of the parents there. And hopefully we can make some more progress on some solutions there.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Ma?
Thank you, Mayor Little. In addition to the PAC meeting at Canyon Heights, I also attended a safety blitz put on at Capilano Elementary School. It was organized by the School District 44. Culver Man was there, ICBC, the RCMP, the PAC, parents, the school staff, and also our own staff, both from bylaws and from an engineering department. And this is something that both councillors Back and I have kind of picked up. There's a lot of concern around safety, when parents are drop off their kids at school. And it's great that we're trying to work together on some solutions, but I can see this concern being something that other schools are going to bring up. So this is something that is part of community building that I think we need to look at. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ma. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I recently took part in a two-day strategic planning session with Metro Vancouver. The board was invited to take part in laying out our strategic plan for the next term. And I can say that the big issue that emerged during the session was resilient funding from senior levels of government to be able to fund the type of infrastructure that Metro Vancouver is in need of in order to deal with the regional growth plan, which has been approved by Metro Vancouver. All municipalities are on board. 2 were not, and their issues have been addressed. So it's going to be that secure funding going forward. And obviously, there's some challenges. There hasn't been a lot of additional funding that's been highlighted recently in the federal budget. And so there's some big questions out there as far as the cost to the future. So.
Great. Thank you very much. I've got a few reports myself. So I was also at the North Shore Sport Awards, and so I wanted to pass on congratulations to the triathlon group for the recognition that they received, which Councillor Back is a part of. It was great to get back in person there and see such an amazing group of athletes. I almost felt bad for the athletes that were in the same group as Connor Bedard for elite male athletes, because they've done such amazing work and they've done things, but there's no question you've got a world level talent from North Vancouver there that needs to be recognized as well. And so it was great to see Connor's dad come out and receive that award. Another event I had this week was with Mountainside, which is one of the high schools here. It's the alternative program for School District 44. And the recognition really was not only just the official opening of Mountainside after they'd done their seismic refit, but it's the recognition that over the last 15 years, we've had a seismic upgrade program that has been going on with all of our high schools, and this represents the last one to get done. So it is the completion of a massive seismic upgrade project. So congratulations to the School District 44 for completing that. Also, I wasn't able to come to the Road Safety Blitz at Capilano, but the day before I was at the Road Safety Blitz at Norgate Elementary School. And so got to see with the RCMP and school district, see the traffic flow in and around there, and some of our staff as well. And then I did just want to say a thank you to Mike Danks, team leader of North Shore Rescue, for standing in for me at the Little League opening pitch up in Lynn Valley. The most nerve-wracking thing you've ever done is throwing out the opening pitch with 600 parents and kids, and you're pitching not to your kid, you're pitching to someone else's kid. It's nerve-wracking, but I was not available on Saturday, and the team leader of North Shore Rescue was able to step in, and I haven't asked, but I also haven't had hate mail or anything like that, so he's probably pretty good. I think I think I'm 6 for 8 on opening pitches. Yes, well, Little League was not so great. It was a rainy day. This is where the excuses come out. But it was we had a tent over home plate and with a microphone and stand. And I hit the tent. I smoked the tent on the pitch. So the poor kid is sitting in there waiting for the ball, but that was it. It's nerve-wracking. It is. I will make sure you all have an opportunity to do something like that because there's no question it's nerve-wracking. But that was it for my reports. And Councillor Ma, I see your hand up. Is that from before? Okay. Okay, well, having completed the business of the evening, I'll accept adjournment. Thank you, Councillor Muri. Once again, thank you very much to the staff for preparing the reports for consideration tonight. And thank you to members of the public for participating in the meeting. Everybody have a fantastic week. Enjoy your evening. Good night.